benefits.
And new details about the benefits European migrants bring to the UK have caused some uncomfortable reading for politicians trying to win the support of voters who are sceptical about immigration.
Well, more on that story now, and the study has revealed European migrants to the UK pay more in taxes than they receive in benefits, although migrants from outside the continent have cost the country billions of pounds over the last 2 decades. Sky's economics editor Ed Conway has the details at the screen.
Now, you might have noticed, actually, today's report from the UCL has been reported in newspapers in 2 very different ways. On the one hand, we had some papers saying that immigrants were a drain on the public purse. You can see this here. And then others which saying they were good news for the exchequer, that the UK gains money from EU migrants, all from one study. So which one is right? Well, it depends on which figures you actually look at. The main findings, and there were 2 sets of findings in this report, the main findings covered this period from 2001 to 2011. And during that period, they found that EU migrants made a net contribution to the exchequer of £20 billion. Non-EU migrants also contributed to the tune of £5 billion, so net contribution £5 billion, while those born here in the UK cost the economy a net total of £617 billion because they received more in the way of benefits than they paid in taxes. But it's a bit different story when you look at the period from 1995 over here, 95 to 2011. EU immigrants were also net contributors, but by a smaller amount, nearer to £4.4 billion, whereas non-EU migrants are now shown to have cost the UK economy £118 billion. Whereas UK-born citizens in this period, they also were a net cost, slightly smaller, £591. So why this difference? Well, first of all, the 1995 data, so this one, it isn't entirely reliable. It doesn't include just new migrants, and it probably overstates their cost for various reasons. These authors of this report say that makes those numbers a bit less reliable. Critics have voiced concerns about the entire report.
It's all very well to look at a group of young people coming from Eastern Europe who are going to be working because that's what they've come for. But you can't ignore what that's likely to happen over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
But whichever set of figures you're going to look at, there are some common threads between them all. First of all, immigrants saved the UK government £6.8 billion in terms of education costs. That's 2001 to 2011. And if you look in this period, 1995 to 2011, it's £49 billion in terms of a saving. And immigrants are less likely to claim benefits. Only a 23% chance of immigrants claiming benefits here, compared with 40% for those born in the UK. The key thing this report shows is that recent immigrants, whether from the EU or elsewhere, more than pay their way.
Well, I spoke to one of the report authors, Professor Dustmann, earlier today. The immigration minister has responded to your report and said the focus of it is too narrow, that it's out of date, it ends in 2011, and that over the course of the last 18 months, net migration from the EU has more than doubled.
When we have the data on the last 18 months, we will conduct analysis on the last 18 months. The problem with analysis of this type is we need data, and data is always lagging in availability. But I don't think that our numbers will dramatically change, because the composition of immigration from European countries and non-European countries has not radically changed over the last 18 months.
The other criticism of the report, that it doesn't take into account the pressure on infrastructure, on schools, on roads, on housing services, on the NHS, for example, and those are things that really matter to communities, aren't they?
So we have to be a bit careful here. We do take into account the cost of social services, we do take into account the cost of hospitals, and we give immigrants the share of these costs. That's what we definitely do, otherwise the whole thing would be
But the strain
meaningless.
on those services.
You are perfectly right. So the other aspect, of course, is the strain we see in times of demographic change. And immigration in particular areas does create demographic change. We have more children, we have perhaps more people who draw on some services, and of course such demographic changes necessitate the adaptation of public services, whether these changes happen through migration or through natural population changes. We are at the moment in the situation where some communities feel the pressure of that, And I would think it's the role of policy to make it for those communities easier to adjust to those demographic changes.
Some are concerned that the data is being cherry-picked to stress the benefits of EU migration as the main finding of this, and what's being buried is actually the cost of immigrants from outside of Europe, which is anywhere between 120 billion and 150 billion.
First of all, it's pretty ridiculous to accuse us of cherry-picking something of a report which we wrote ourselves. So if we wanted to cherry-pick, we wouldn't have put into the report numbers which we would not have wanted to be known to the public. So we are academics, we don't do that. For completeness, we have also covered in this report the population of immigrants over the period over which we have data, and that is from 1995 onwards. That is very different from looking at immigrants who came since 2000, because immigrants who came since 2000, we can consider their entire migration history from entry to the country onwards until the data allows us to do so, and that is 2011. Now, for immigrants in the other analysis, we look at all immigrants who are in the country. So for 1995, that means, for instance, there were many immigrants who arrived much earlier and for whom we may lose out on their productive years. The period between 1985 and 1995 was a period of very low immigration to the UK. So in the mid-90s, the immigrant population was basically an immigrant population who came here 20, 30 years earlier. So it is true that for those immigrants who are non-European, and that's very important, we do find that they constituted a cost to the fiscal system, but so did natives. We had a deficit over that period, so every time you have a deficit, the average person in this country will, in a way, spend more than paying into the system. And that was the case over that period.
Well, joining me now are here in the studio Shadow Immigration Minister for Labour, David Hanson MP, and Sir Andrew Green, Chairman of Migration Watch UK, is in Oxfordshire. He's soon to be ennobled as a crossbench peer, Lord Green. Lord Green, if I could come to you first, the conclusion of this research appears to be that because the country is running a deficit, people tend to cost money, but actually those recent European Union migrants didn't cost money. They actually generated a bit of cash for the economy. That's good news, isn't it?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to say a bit of cash. If you actually look at this 20 billion, that's over 10 years. And what it comes down to, with a little bit of arithmetic, is rather less than £1 a week per head of our population. Now, against that, you have to set the fact that we've got an extra 1 million people in this country as a result of that immigration, with all the pressures on the public services that you referred to earlier. And it's a matter of opinion as to whether £1 a week is going to make up for the extra pressure on schools, on roads, on houses, on all our infrastructure, and indeed on our environment and on our community.
So, a week net, because they paid their taxes for those public services, haven't they? So this is a net gain at a time when many other sections of the population are actually costing money.
Yes, they paid some money, certainly, but I don't think this is a matter of arithmetic, quite honestly. I mean, you can do what you like with these figures by choosing your time periods, choosing which migrants you're talking about. What we're really looking at here is a very substantial inflow of migrants that has taken place in the last 10 years, and that if it's allowed to continue, our population will grow by 12 million in the next 20 years. That's 12 times the population of Birmingham, twice the population of Scotland. So, I mean, you can do your arithmetic however you like, but we are faced as a country with a very considerable issue here, and it has to be addressed not with arithmetic, but with a policy, and a policy which, in my view, needs to take account of the settled will of the British public. But that's more for David Hanson than for me, I think.
Well, let's put that to David Hanson, because I'm a bit confused now. We're told that those recent immigrants are a good thing, but Ed Miliband has already apologised on Tony Blair's behalf and said that the Blair government made a mistake letting them in.
Well, I think it shows that it's not black and white issue. There is a real financial benefit, but we've got to look at some of the other issues, and some of those issues are real genuine ones in my community and elsewhere, such as the pace of change in some communities, such as the impact on certain areas on wages, and such as things to do with labour conditions. Which is why.
So it was a mistake. You think it was a mistake to let them in?
We've said that we should have put transitional controls in place in the early part of the 2000s, and we've said if for the future entry countries we'll put transitional controls in future. But this report is saying there is a financial benefit. And there are real job creation opportunities and growth in our economy, filling skill shortages because of that. It's a balanced picture. We need fair migration, Andrew, and what we've got here is Adam. What we've got Andrew. Yeah. And what we've got here is the opportunity to look at that.
But I mean, the interesting thing is what this report also says is that the previous wave of immigration, probably predominantly from Afro-Caribbean and Asian immigration, is actually a net burden on the economy.
I think we need to nail this one right now, Adam, because that puts into place the fact that there's a cost now to people who've been here for maybe 50 years, who've paid taxes all their lives, and are now drawing down.
But this is all net in the end, isn't it?
This is not net. If you look at the professor's report, what it's saying is there's a cost now for people who are receiving pensions, receiving healthcare, but these are people who've paid in all their lives. This just shows the cost. It doesn't show the taxation paid.
Andrew Green, I mean, do you think this suggests that not just the European immigration, but earlier immigration was also a mistake?
Are you asking me that?
Yeah.
I think the scale of it was, yes, I think the scale of it was certainly a mistake. The net migration into this country was less than 50,000 until 1997. Since then, from 1998 onwards, it has quadrupled, and it's now running at 250,000 a year. And it's that huge increase that is causing the problems. No one is opposed to immigration. It is obviously a natural and useful and right part of an open economy and an open society. But when it runs out of control, which is where we're at now, then it's going to cause serious difficulties, and they've got to be dealt with. And it's no use throwing a few numbers around and saying, patting people on the head and say, well, get on with it. I think public opinion now is absolutely clear. 70% want to see it reduced, 50% by a lot, and they mean it. This has been a consistent view of the public for several years now. And, you know, I think part of the discontent, if I may put it like that, with the political system is that the public feel that it has not responded to their views and their feelings on a number of issues, of which this is one. And I think that's not a good situation to be in.
Okay, well, David Hans, let's put that to you. Do you accept that view that there is a public discontent, and how would the next Labour government deal with that?
There are a range of concerns, but what we've got to focus on is where there is fair and good migration. University students, entrepreneurs, business people hoping to grow our economy is good. But we do have some challenges in relation to the impact in certain parts of the country of the wider European migration.
Agricultural workers, when indigenous people don't want to do that work.
But we need to look at, in my view, and what we're trying to do is to put down some basics. So, for example, our agricultural workers enforce the minimum wage, enforce gangmaster legislation, ensure that local people are not excluded from jobs through recruitment agencies solely recruiting from Eastern Europe. There are things that we can do, but what we shouldn't do is close our borders completely. We need strong borders, we need to tackle illegal migration, but we need to ensure that we help grow our economy. And immigration, as has been shown by this report, can contribute to growth and can ensure that people pay taxes that pay for the services that you and I would enjoy.
Well, thank you both very much. Thank you.